Good afternoon. The Secretary General and the President will make statements. Secretary General.
President Duda, there and there, it's great to see you again. Welcome back to the NATO Headquarters. It's always a pleasure to have you here. This week we mark the 25th anniversary of Poland's accession into NATO. NATO's open door helped to spread freedom and democracy in Europe. And since joining, Poland has become a key ally and a security provider. You are building one of the biggest armies in NATO. You spend around 4% of GDP on defense, topping the NATO table. And you are adding major capabilities, including F-35s, HIMARS, and helicopters. Poland makes the whole alliance stronger, and NATO makes all allies safer. US Patriot batteries and Italian jets guard your skies. Over 10,000 Allied troops are based in Poland. And in the summer, a long-planned US missile defense site in Poland will join NATO's missile shield. Today, in our meeting, we addressed Russia's war aggression against Ukraine. Despite heavy Russian losses, Putin has not scaled back his war aims. The situation remains difficult. Ukraine is in a dire need of ammunition. Every day of delay in the US Congress translates into real effects on the battlefield. This morning, I released our latest polling across the alliance. It shows that 2/3 of our citizens on both sides of the Atlantic want their country to continue supporting Ukraine. We also know that a large majority in Congress favor continued support. Now we need to see this public and political support expressed in the vote as soon as possible. With courage and creativity, Ukraine has shown that Russia's military can be beaten. Russia is paying a very high price for marginal gains. On land, Putin's war has already cost Russia over 350,000 military casualties. At sea, Ukrainian attacks have sunk or disabled significant part of Russia's Black Sea fleet. In the air, Ukraine is shooting down key Russian assets, including high-value surveillance aircraft. I want to thank Poland for being one of the strongest supporters of Ukraine, providing weapons and offering refugee to over 1 million Ukrainians. Today, in our meeting, we also discussed further bolstering NATO's deterrence and defense. In response to Russia's war, we have increased our presence in the east of the alliance, including in Poland. And this month, more than 20,000 soldiers are participating in the Polish-led Dragoon 24, part of exercise Steadfast Defender, our largest military exercise since the Cold War. We will continue to reinforce our alliance, and at our summit in July, we will take further steps to strengthen NATO, support Ukraine, and deepen partnerships around the world. So, President Duda, thank you again for being here today. And thank you for Poland's outstanding contribution to our alliance. So welcome, please you have the floor.
Panie sekretarzu generalny,
Mr. Secretary General, ladies and
bardzo się cieszę, że w tym bardzo podniosłym dla nas Polaków momencie w 25-lecie.
I'm glad that in this very solemn moment, on the 25th anniversary of Poland's accession to NATO, I have got this huge honor and pleasure to visit the most important place from this point of view in the political sense, the White House, where the President of the United States has his residence, the leader of the most important state in the North Atlantic Alliance, and the biggest, the most important ally in the world with the largest armed forces, and a guarantor of security to a large extent, and the NATO headquarters here in Brussels, where I'm satisfied to say for many years The office of Secretary General has been performed by a European politician who understands so perfectly well the security of Europe, of the world. But something that I want to stress very strongly as a Pole, he also understands our security very deeply. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General, for your last almost 9 years during which I have had an honor to cooperate with you. Thank you that today we can take this perspective and look how much NATO has changed and how much the situation of Poland in NATO has changed over the 10 years. Also thanks to you, and as a society, as Poles, we are greatly thankful to you for that, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 generations of Poles waited for that important moment, which happened 25 years ago. 3 generations. That was the generation of my grandparents, of those who were fighting against 2 totalitarian regimes, the Nazi regime and later the Soviet one. They fought in the Second World War. They wanted to defend Poland. Then there was the generation of my parents, the generation of solidarity, who behind the Iron Curtain fought to regain full sovereignty and full independence. They were fighting for the restoration of democracy. And finally, my generation, the generation of the children of solidarity, when in 1989, we were regaining our independence. I was 17 years old. When we exited NATO in 1999, I was 27. I was a mature adult person, and I remember that very well. These were landmark moments, and they again brought us back in a political sense to the community of the free and democratic West. Something that we always stress. From the cultural perspective, we have always been part of it, but politics separated us from this West, and we came back at the turn of the 20th and 21st century. And today, for 25 years, we have been members of NATO. And 9 years ago, before the NATO summit in Warsaw, I was telling Mr. Secretary General, Poland is in NATO. It has been in NATO for a long time. I would also like NATO to be in Poland. And today, NATO is in Poland, as Secretary General has just said. Several thousand soldiers of NATO forces are stationed in our country right now. Poland is today an important part of NATO on the eastern flank, an important guarantor of security also for the countries on the eastern flank. We are not only getting security from our allies, but we are also providing the security. We have been doing that right from the start as a credible member of the alliance, shoulder to shoulder, fighting in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We were there shoulder to shoulder with the armies of the North Atlantic Alliance, especially with the U.S. Army, bringing security and peace to others. But today, we also support our neighbors from the Baltic states. Today, we are guarding the security of the Suwałki Gap together. That is the only land corridor giving access to the Baltic states, to the NATO countries. Today, we are guarding the eastern border of the North Atlantic Alliance with full responsibility. And also today we are making it possible for NATO, for the allies to support Ukraine, which is fighting against the Russian aggression, also making our territory available for providing that help. But today, we are also receiving support. The already mentioned NATO troops stationed on our soil, military infrastructure, U.S. infrastructure, and from other countries, British, the capabilities from Germany. We are grateful for that. Thanks to that, we are able to better protect our airspace today. Thanks to those assets, Poles feel safer when they see NATO troops on our soil. Mr. Secretary General, thank you also for the decisions which have recently been taken. One of them is the decision to place a NATO Ukraine Training Center in Bydgoszcz. Another decision was taken really recently about setting up a research and development center for modern defense technologies at the Kraków University of Technology, named after Stanisław Staszic. institutes. And the last point is something that gives me great joy. Also being an inhabitant of Kraków, I have family connections with that university. I'm really glad that excellent engineers at that university, professors, staff, but also students attending that university, doing research there, will have additional possibilities resulting from cooperation within NATO. And this will open up to them greater possibilities for development. And at the same time, their talents, unique knowledge, expertise, and skills will also be used to build security and to also develop defensive technologies, military defensive technologies as part of NATO. I'm really glad with that. Ladies and gentlemen, today at our meeting, as I said, it was a very joyful and very nice meeting that we have had with Mr. Secretary General. I informed Mr. Secretary General of the meetings that I had in Washington 2 days ago, and also my yesterday visit to the 3rd Infantry Division of the U.S. Army in Fort Stewart. But first and foremost, I gave account of political meetings where security and defense, of course, took up a large part of our conversation. On Tuesday, I met in the Congress with representatives of the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States. We discussed the security situation in our part of the world. On the eastern flank of NATO, I was describing our needs, giving the assessment of the security situation. All of that, of course, was discussed through the lens of the war in Ukraine and all the things connected with the reborn Russian imperialism. What I was trying to do, I was trying to convince our allies to increase their scope of assistance for Ukraine by telling them that when the defenders of Ukraine receive the cutting-edge NATO equipment to defend their homeland, then they are able to realistically put up resistance to the Russian onslaught, and they are able to stop the aggressor who has got a big advantage over them in terms of the numbers. Nobody has got any doubt about that. But I do hope that this assistance also from the United States will be going to Ukraine in the future as well. We also discussed assisting Ukraine in Paris a short time ago among the leaders of NATO countries, but not only NATO countries. We were discussing how to provide assistance. We were discussing what Ukraine needs, and I'm happy that decisions were taken jointly on how to support Ukraine as soon as possible with things that are most needed. First and foremost, we were talking about ammunition supplies. I'm glad that a number of European states have decided to provide that assistance, including Poland. We have taken that decision, and we are now part of that process. I do hope that big supplies of ammunition, which will be provided to Ukraine in the nearest future, will be helpful in preparing defense against possible further attempts of Russian offensive. Thank you also for the decision taken within NATO on huge assistance that will happen over the next years, $100 billion that will be channeled. And I do believe that thanks to those funds, Ukraine will be able to defend its sovereignty, independence. And we have stressed right from the beginning what has to happen to provide the security of Europe and the world. We hope that this will happen, that the Russian imperialism will be stopped, that it will be absolutely stopped in Ukraine, and through stopping that imperialism, through defeating that imperialism, it will be reprimanded, it will be told off, so that Russia has no more designs to take away land from other countries, to take away freedom from other nations, to force other nations to work like slaves for Russia. This is extremely important. We know that from history. Unfortunately, we Poles know that very well. We survived a couple of Russian occupations. There were different manifestations of that occupation. There was Tsar's Russia who occupied us, the Soviet Russia who occupied occupied us. We know, we understand what it means to be dominated by Russia. When we hear the term Ruski Mir, we are scared, and nobody wants those foreign trends which do not fit us, which are not in line with the principles of our culture, contrary to our culture. These are just foreign trends. We do not want these trends to be dominant in our home. We are resisting that. We are happy to be part of the Euro-Atlantic Alliance today, that we are happy to be part of NATO, because the alliance today is our guarantee of security. But apart from that, what we want, first and foremost, we want to be responsible. We want to be responsible for our own country and our own security. That is why today we spend more than 4% of our GDP on defense. We are modernizing the Polish armed forces in a very dynamic way, and we are going to go down that path also in the future. That was one of the topics of my conversation in the United States. We are buying a lot, and we are doing a lot of military purchases in the United States on a grand scale. And I also would like to appeal to the allies. I made that announcement on a couple of occasions. I make this demand that all of us within NATO spend 3% of GDP on defense. I appeal that we increase the level of spending from 2 to 3%. Why? Because in a nutshell, 2% was good to meet the situation that we had back in 2014. Back then, Russia indeed started to occupy Crimea, but it did not launch an open attack. It did not launch an open scale aggression. Back then, Russia would say, Donetsk and Lugansk is not Russia, these are separatists, those people would like to come to Russia, to join Russia, these are Russians living there, it is their own military initiative, Russia has nothing to do with that. Today, 2 years ago, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, a brutal war is waging there. Russia bombards civilians, towns and cities, it destroys and ruins settlements and murders people. We can see clearly what we have to deal with. Today we need more force, we need more military assets, today we need more ammunition, today we need a very active policy also on development, research, concerning new types of armament. Today we need to recreate, to a large extent, the military industry. And all of that means that we need to increase our defense spending. That is why I urge all allies to jointly increase that level to a minimum of 3% of GDP to make sure that our security policy is truly efficient and effective, that we are able to meet our own needs and also to support our neighbors from Ukraine. This is the situation that NATO has today after 25 years of Poland's presence in the alliance. But let me stress once again, we are hugely proud and we are happy to be part of the NATO. We as Poland, we as Poles. The North Atlantic Alliance enjoys huge support among Polish people. These were the two most important decisions that we made in the last 35 years since 1989, the accession to NATO in 1999, and the accession of the European Union later. This gives us a lot of satisfaction, and thank you also for the fact that NATO can see our situation, it understands our needs, and we are glad that we can cooperate within NATO. Thank you also to you, Mr. Secretary General. As I said at the outset of my remarks, thank you for seeing our needs, and thank you for understanding our special situation, which also is entangled with a lot of our historical experiences. Thank you very much.
That concludes this press point. Thank you all very much.